I lost my hearing fairly suddenly.
I began losing my hearing when I was about 35 years old. Having trouble on the phone probably started about 15 years ago.
I dreaded for the phone to ring.
It was very hard for me to understand sometimes.
Most of the time, it would be, huh? I'm sorry, what was that?
I would get little bits here and there of conversation, but I just didn't feel confident that I was fully understanding what I was trying to hear on the phone.
The telephone was just a useless tool.
Not had a very good relationship.
And it got to the point where my children got frustrated with me on the phone and would not communicate. It finally just became impossible. I knew something had to change.
When I got my chapter, it just changed my world completely.
Everyone was amazed. I was amazed.
It was a miracle to me.
With the capital, I don't have that hesitation.
I just love knowing that I have something there and that I don't have to be scared or anxious, and it allows me to be independent.
And now I can understand them because I can see it as I'm talking on the phone. I'm like, oh, okay, I got it now.
To hear their voice, to know I'm not missing anything, to realize that, now I'm not just, seeing a few words here and there, I'm filling in the gaps.
The first time I tried the Captel phone, I called my mother and I could hear her voice.
She realized that I wasn't saying, huh? Or hang on, slow down, wait a minute.
And he was, this is Craig? Yeah, it is. And we talked for about an hour, and he was just amazed that I could actually hear him.
And she said, what happened? And I said, Captel.
If I'm to talk on the telephone, it's Captel. I guess I've had it long enough now. It just seems to be part of me.
It's my lifeline. It's my connection to the world. It's the only time my life is on ring. I'll get it.
Y'all have changed my world. You just don't know. You really have.
In my book, it's perfect.
I'm Jessica Lemon of AARP Texas. As a sponsor, we hope that you are gaining new insights into family caregiving and that you have the opportunity to connect with other caregivers and experts on aging. Family caregiving is a priority for AARP. It is essential to our work today, but that's not all. AARP is doing amazing things to make life better for the age 50+ populations and the generations to follow. We help improve their financial well-being and their health. We want people to contribute to society and local communities and to fully enjoy life. Some of you may already know that AARP has a strong presence throughout Texas in many communities in this great state, including Austin, the capital city where I live and work. Again, this year, AARP Texas is bringing opportunities to our members and others through virtual events, just like this one that we're participating in today. We hope you have the opportunity to enjoy these free offerings. Not only are there programs to help unpaid family caregivers, but there are presentations to help people avoid being victims of fraud. We host fitness seminars and we work with city leaders towards making this an even more age-friendly community. And know this, volunteers are critical for our mission. There are many opportunities for those who can give a little time to volunteer. You can learn more about these local happenings at aarp.org/TX or find us at the AARP Texas Facebook page. But again, of course, family caregiving is a priority. There are 48 million family caregivers in the US, 3.4 million in Texas alone. They provide help to loved ones, usually a parent, spouse, or sibling. Caregiving can be anything from driving a loved one to a doctor's appointment, making sure bills are paid, cleaning the house, or helping bathe and dress, and many caregivers do fairly complex medical tasks. Caregivers come from every generation, from Gen Z to the silent generation, and every racial and ethnic group. and you know most of us will either be a caregiver or need care at some point during our lives. AARP recently released new research on how much family caregivers spend out of their own pockets to care for a loved one. We found that almost every caregiver spends money on caregiving, and about 8 in 10 routinely spend their own money on caregiving. The average amount that caregivers spend each year is $7,240. That's more than a fourth of their household income on average. Housing expenses like rent or mortgage payments, assisted living, and home modifications make up more than half of caregiver spending, followed by medical expenses. Caregivers also experience indirect financial setbacks, often postponing their own personal savings for retirement. But I am here to tell you there's action that can help. Congress is considering a bipartisan bill called the Credit for Caring Act, which would create a tax credit of up to $5,000 for working family caregivers. This could help offset some of those major expenses that we know caregivers are facing. AARP, along with 80 other organizations, endorse the Credit for Caring Act. Family caregivers are the backbone of our long-term care system, but they are breaking under the pressure. Creating a tax credit for family caregivers is one way that Congress can help. If you would like to learn more about the Credit for Caring Act, visit aarp.org/caregiving. There, you will also find many resources available for family caregivers just like you. So again, that's aarp.org/caregiving. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm Jessica Lemon with AARP Texas, and thank you for all that you do as family caregivers or to support caregivers.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning. My name is Rob Fabian, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for Age of Central Texas, and we are very proud to bring you this year's Williamson County Caregiver Conference. This is our final presentation for the 8th annual conference. We've had 2 fantastic presentations this week, and today will be no exception. So we are so glad that you're joining us today. Before we get started, let's go over some very simple housekeeping items. Number 1, we are recording this session. So if for any reason you need to leave early today, you might have a tech problem on your side, don't worry. We are recording the session and it will be available later this week on our YouTube channel. And in fact, we are going to send you the links to all of the sessions from this week, along with all the supportive materials. So keep an eye out for that email that'll be coming in the next day or so. Speaking of emails, when we sent you the reminder emails for our sessions, we also sent you a link to the program for this week's conference. We hope that you will take a look at that, because not only does it have great information about all of our wonderful sponsors and our fantastic speakers, but we also curated some really wonderful caregiver resources for you. So be sure and take a look at that program. Also, if you look right down here at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat feature. It looks like one of those thought bubbles that you see in the comic strips. We want you to click on that, and then during our presentation today, please ask your questions, because the reason that we do this is for you. We bring these fantastic speakers and experts to bring their knowledge and experience to share with you as a caregiver. So this is your opportunity to ask all of your questions and have our experts answer them for you. So be sure during our presentation today to ask your questions so we can answer them. Now, we promised that we would end at 11:30. We're going to keep that promise to you because we know your time is very valuable. So if for some reason we don't get to every single question during our time together this morning, don't worry. We're still going to answer your question. We are going to make sure that we answer you offline if we happen to run out of time. But be sure and ask those questions. finally, we're going to send you a survey in a couple of days, and it'll be an electronic survey. It'll take you all of 2 minutes to complete, but it's very important. So we hope that you'll complete it for us, because we want your feedback so we know how to plan next year's conference. We want to know, as a caregiver, what are some of the issues that you're dealing with in your journey, so that we can find those experts to be presentations for next year. So be sure and answer the survey, because I guarantee you we read every single one of them. And all of our presentations this year were based off of the surveys from last year. So be sure and answer those. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Perez Del Rio. She is our speaker for today. She has more than 20 years of experience working as an occupational therapist and certified driver rehabilitation specialist for the St. David's Adaptive Driving Program right here in Austin. Jennifer specializes in driver safety assessments and training for clients of all ages and diagnosis, with the goal of helping families navigate the complexities of driving and independent community mobility. Jennifer enjoys reaching out to the community to educate clients and caregivers about driver safety so that our community stays safe. Jennifer, we are so glad to have you with us today, and we're very excited about this presentation, because we know that as caregivers, a lot of times driving is one of the big issues that our loved ones have to deal with, and having that conversation is often one of the most difficult things that we can do as caregivers. So I'm very glad that you're here with us today. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, let's see if I can share my screen. Go. Get my PowerPoint up. Okay. Can everybody see me? There we are. Okay.
Perfect.
My name's Jennifer. I've been an OT for 21 years now, and I've been working at St. David's. As a student, we always do internships and as therapists, and I was an intern here at St. David's, and I learned about the driving program from my mentor, my clinical instructor. And so I've really pretty much been involved with that even before I became a therapist. So it's very interesting to me. And in the beginning, it's kind of scary, but it's really important to think about helping people be safe and helping people understand what they can do to stay independent. So I've always been involved in our driving program here at St. David's, and I really do love it. So I'm gonna get started with my presentation here. Let's see if that works. Okay, somehow there we are. All right, so I was going to talk to you guys today about how aging process affects driving safety. And there's a lot of different things that we have to consider as we age, because our bodies and our mind changes, our vision changes, and all of those things affect our ability to be safe while driving. As an occupational therapist, we always talk about pretty much everything that we do as a task, or we call it activities of daily living. If anyone has ever been in OT, they know that ADL term. So when we look at any particular task, we break it down into different components that are involved in the task. For driving, we look at the physical skills, the visual skills, and the cognitive skills that are involved in the driving task. When we think about those physical components, we're talking about range of motion, how your limbs move. Can you steer the car if you have arthritis or a rotator cuff injury? Does your foot get to the gas pedal and the brake pedal? Are you strong enough to do those actions? We also talk about your endurance. Do you get tired very quickly? Does driving make you so tired then, and then getting out and walking through the store to then drive home? We talk about your coordination. As you know, with driving, you're doing multiple things at once. You're steering, you're looking, you're using your feet to do different things. So it's a lot of different coordination activities as well. And then reaction time is a big thing. When we are aging, our reaction time slows down as you get older. And that can be both visually and physically. You're reacting to things maybe a little bit more slowly. I like to always explain what proprioception is, because that's a big word that most people don't know unless they've had some sort of medical event. So proprioception is your joint or your body's sense of position in the world as it moves through the world. A good example is when you try to open a door that you think is too heavy and you pull it really hard, but it's not that heavy. So the door kind of slams open with you. Or stepping down a curb and you misjudge it and maybe step too hard. So your proprioception is your awareness of what your body's doing at any particular time. A lot of times this is affected with people's awareness of how hard they're pressing on the gas pedal, or did their foot miss the brake? A lot of times we'll see people on the news who maybe say that their brakes have failed, or they didn't know that they were pressing on the gas pedal and then they accidentally crashed into a building or drove up onto a sidewalk. So proprioception is a very important thing that we have to talk. Your balance and your walking, but it also affects your ability to control the car safely. Lots of different medical diagnoses can affect your proprioceptive sense. And then we like to explain to people about getting in and out of the car safely and that fall risk. And if you have any kind of mobility aids like a walker or a cane or a wheelchair that you need to load and unload from a car, because a lot of people will say, well, I can get in the car and I can drive, but I need my caregiver to put my wheelchair in the car and I can't get out of the car without my caregiver. Well, if you need a caregiver to help you with those things, maybe then the caregiver should be the one who is driving. Maybe they are more safe because they can, they have all those abilities to do that movement. Because driving is just driving to the store, but then you also have to get out of the car and get into the store. A lot of people forget about that part of the task. And then we look at vision. Vision is one of the most important parts of driving, of course, because you need to be able to see where you're going. Visual acuity is, the 20/20, 20/40. The DPS has set minimum standards for visual acuity. So when we start to see people who have macular degeneration or glaucoma or cataracts, that definitely does affect that visual acuity. And night vision is something that we all know changes as we get older. I know that my night vision has changed. It started changing about 10 years ago. And so I feel very uncomfortable driving at night and choose to not do it. But a lot of people feel like they can drive at night when really they probably shouldn't. Glare recovery is one thing that we always talk about with driving, especially as your eyes get older. Our eyes start making those changes where they don't have the adjustment to light as easily as it happens when you are younger. And so that is when you come out of a dark movie theater into the bright sunshine, your eyes have a harder time adjusting. Or as you're driving down a dark road and somebody's headlights come right at you and it's blinding for a second. And so it's harder for your eyes to make those adjustments as you get older. Contrast sensitivity is something that people aren't really aware of, but a lot of times you will notice it when the road is very shadowy. It might be harder to detect where the lane markings are, or if there's a pothole or something like that. You can see that on streets where there are a lot of trees, or again, where it's very shadowy. Peripheral vision is another thing that we need to always be aware of, because that helps us with our awareness of where other cars are around us. And so it's very important to kind of have that awareness. And if you do have limited neck range of motion or limited peripheral vision, you know, it's important to know that so you can compensate for those things. Depth perception is another issue we look at when we're talking about driving. That gives us an awareness of where our car is in relation to other people's cars or static objects. Like, for instance, when you're trying to park in between two parked cars, or navigate through like a drive-through restaurant where there are certain barricades and you have to go in a certain path. If you're a little too far over, you might hit the curb or bump your mirror on the pylon. And so those are things that we look at, especially as people have had brain injuries like strokes or other things that could impact their ability to judge that distance and space around them. And visual spatial perception is another thing that goes along with depth perception. And we look at that as well, because that helps us, again, judge those distances. Another thing we always assess in our driving assessments is your visual scanning abilities. So how quickly can you find information in the environment? Did you notice that school zone sign as you were driving by? Did you notice that the light on the school zone sign was flashing? So now you need to slow your speed. Visual scanning also involves awareness of what's happening on the other side of the road, the oncoming traffic, if there are any joggers or baby strollers running past you, or bicycles, anything like that that could impact your safety and cause you to have to change what is happening while you're out there driving. And then we look at cognition. Cognition is something that is really a little bit more challenging to assess when we're talking about driving safety. It's important to have good ability to pay attention, and also to pay attention to multiple things at once. You need to know how fast you're going, and you also need to know what the road signs coming up are, so that you can make appropriate decisions if there's a construction zone ahead, or if you need to change lanes. Any of those types of impacts on your ability to pay attention could affect your safety. We also look at information processing. How quickly can you get all of this information in for driving and then have an output? So we take information in, and then we also have a reaction. We have to have a fast decision. If the car in front of us slams on our brake, we have to notice and then quickly also slam on our brake. As we get older, we talk about memory and how that affects somebody's ability to navigate and pay attention to where they're going, and then also know how to return, navigate, and go home. Now we have a lot of cars who have navigation systems built in. Sometimes it's harder for our population that has aged to use that technology. Some people are better at using that technology because they started, 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But if they're just trying to learn a new technology now, as they're already experiencing some cognitive changes, it's a little bit harder to learn that new technology. But as we see, cars are getting smarter, people are getting smarter too. So it is helpful to have that technology and use it. A lot of times we have to have a conversation about how judgment and insight affects people's ability to make safe decisions and interact with other cars on the road. Sometimes we see our folks who have cognitive changes, sometimes maybe have some more issues with anger management, or not really understanding why people are tailgating them, for instance, or making quick lane changes around them, and then not making safe decisions on the road. So it's important to assess those things as we drive. All right. I'm not going to really go over this long list of different diagnoses. As people get older, there are lots of different things that could impact safety while driving. So, you know, if there's any kind of concern for your safety, or if families are mentioning, hey, mom, I'm really worried about your safety. Do you think that I should talk to the doctor about your driving ability? That's kind of the time to start that conversation when people are concerned, when family members are noticing that there are changes. And this could be in someone who's very healthy, but maybe they're having some cognitive challenges, or when we start to see the effects of aging overall. It's a kind of a cumulative effect that could impact someone's safety for driving. So when we look at age and how that relates to driving, we know that chronological age is not necessarily a predictor of one's abilities. I have some folks who I've worked with who, you know, I think my most recent person who was the oldest was 96. And she was very, very safe and had an amazing ability, but the doctor wanted her checked out because she had had a recent hip fracture, and he wasn't sure if she was safe to go back to driving after that hip fracture. But she was a very, very bright and vibrant person and had really no problems with her safety, had good cognitive abilities and good judgment, and, you know, kind of knew what her limitations were. So that 96-year-old cannot really be compared to someone who might be 75 and be experiencing some more significant changes in their abilities. So we don't discriminate here and just say, okay, at 60, everybody needs to be checked out, because it's very, very individual when we talk about that aging process. I have some folks that I've worked with who were in their late 50s and early 60s who were already having significant challenges for safety, you know, and then we can't compare them to the 96-year-old who is doing amazing. But we do know that the aging process does cause a decline in all of those abilities that I just mentioned: the physical skills, the cognitive skills, and the visual skills. So those, as people get older, those impacts to those abilities are cumulative, but it is very individual. We also talk about how adding medical conditions and more medications increase as people get older. And so as those things increase in a person, then we also see that those skills may be impacted. Again, very individualized. I also see a lot of my older folks will tell me, and it is true, I do know this, that they drive fewer miles per year. They have a very good safety record, and those habits that they have built in decrease their exposure to crash risk. So they self-restrict, they try not to go out at night, they modify their driving habits, and they stay in familiar areas. Those things keep people safer. Now, anywhere we know, there's traffic everywhere. And we also know, and all my patients tell me this, the traffic has gotten worse, especially in Austin. Our traffic, it's a very busy city. I have noticed, you know, since I started 20 years ago, traffic is crazy. There are FedEx and Amazon delivery trucks stopping in the middle of the road. There never used to be traffic during business hours because people were in the office working. And so I would do my evaluations and it was low traffic anywhere I would go at 11 o'clock in the day, 2:30 in the afternoon, low traffic. Now working is so much more flexible. People are working from home. People have different kinds of schedules that they do. And so we see rush hour may happen at 10 o'clock in the morning. Rush hour may happen at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's everywhere all the time. And so we have to be prepared for the roads that have changed. Another thing I like to tell people is that they learned to drive when the roads were safer. There were fewer cars on the road. Drivers were also more courteous. 20 years ago, not so much anymore. People are more aggressive. People are more angry. We see road rage incidents. And so these are things that as people age, they need to take into consideration with their own driving. Okay, so when we talk about driving, well, we see that these older drivers have a reduced crash risk because of their self-restricting habits. These same older drivers have a higher fatality rate per mile driven than any other age group except our younger drivers. So what we see is that these younger drivers are crashing their cars because they are not experienced, and they're also taking some risks. They're driving a little crazy, they're driving too fast, too aggressive, and they don't have that experience with their car because they're new drivers. And then we see these older drivers that are having these crashes and having this high fatality rate because of their physical, visual, and cognitive changes that are directly related to that aging process. And so that's where we as therapists have to come in and take a look to help make sure people are safe. Okay, a few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, the state of Texas changed their rules. And so now, once you are 79 or older, you must renew your license in person. This might have actually changed because of COVID, but that's, you know, a temporary change with COVID rules. We do have this other rule that they added where drivers 85 or older have to only renew every 2 years. Normally, your license is renewed for 6 years. And once you turn 85, it's every 2 years. When they do that renewal and they make you go in person, the only test that the state requires is a new vision test. There's not a written test or a driving test at that DPS office. And that is only unless there's a concern by the DPS employee. So if the person is acting confused or has difficulty filling out their form, the DPS employee might put a flag on the license, which is concerning because that DPS employee really does not have the training to make a judgment about someone's health based on, you know, how they're behaving at the office. But sometimes that's the only flag that gets on someone's license. And so if the doctor's not reporting a safety concern or the family is not reporting a safety concern, the community is trusting a DPS employee who doesn't have that medical training. That's one reason why we always encourage doctors and families to send someone for further evaluation to make sure that they are safe, because we want our aging folks who are out there driving to have the best information available and the best recommendations for their safety by someone who's trained. So when we look at kind of the main problems that we see with driving, there was this good study that I found by the New York State Office for Aging. And this is the same that we see in our drivers. So I keep it even though it's from New York. So we see people who have slow or delayed reactions for braking and or acceleration, and also slowed reaction time to emergency situations. So if there's for instance, a siren behind, the aging driver may not know exactly what to do or may not hear that siren. We might see our folks who are aging drive a little too slowly or a little too cautious, which can create a hazard to other drivers on the road. Again, we talked about attention and how that can impact your safety. A lot of times we will see people kind of not notice what's happening around them, and that's very hazardous, as well as difficulty staying in the lane, problems following the traffic signals or road signs. I do know in the 20 years that I've been doing this driving evaluation program, there have been some changes in the road signs and some changes in the roads in general, even the roads that we use for the last 20 years. We have new bike lanes that have gone up. We have new pedestrian crosswalk signs with flashing red lights. There's all kinds of things that have changed and evolved, and there's not always that community education that goes in to let drivers know what to do with these new changes. I get a lot of questions about how to handle a bike lane, what to do with that, because the community doesn't necessarily know. And if someone doesn't drive regularly or isn't familiar with these changes, they might make a bad decision about what to do with that. And then we see folks who aren't really sure about the distances. Maybe they stop a little too far out into the intersection or a little too far back from the stop sign. So then they've stopped far back and then they didn't go up to see if it was clear and then just went without really making sure that intersection was safe, or maybe not really making very good turns, too wide or too narrow. So they drive over a curb. And then the most concerning is when people have confusion while they're driving or navigation errors. You hear stories and you see on the highways frequently those silver alerts. And that's a thing where we see people have taken the car and the family doesn't know where their loved one has gone. I have had many people who have been in my driving program and they took a wrong turn because of construction, for instance, or they weren't familiar with the neighborhood. And all of a sudden they were turned around, and instead of calling for help or pulling over, they drove for 2 or 3 hours and made it to another town, ran out of gas, needed police to come and help them. And that's a very, very significant concern for safety, because sometimes they trust a stranger who might not have the best intentions. Or again, we have very extreme weather conditions here in Texas. It sometimes is very, very hot. And now we have a person who may be confused in 100-degree weather with no power to their car because they've run out of gas. No one knows where they are. It's a big safety concern for families. So it's very important to discuss that when people are having navigation errors. As we talk about, this is a caregiving conference. So we talk a lot about how families are dealing with the changes related to someone who is aging and being a caregiver. One thing for me to always express to families is that the most important thing is kind of getting everybody together, the kids, the neighbors, anyone who is helping with this caregiving process as families are dealing with aging or disability and medical changes, to kind of start planning ahead and start talking about these things before they become a silver alert and something where we have to send out the posse to go search for our loved one. It's really important to talk about these things before they become really big problems. And sometimes, we have something that changes very quickly. A family member may have a stroke and then the next day be very much more impaired. So you can't exactly plan ahead for that kind of event. However, it's important to kind of regularly check in and make sure that the kids know and the family friends know. If you have a support network through church or have a caregiving support group or anything like that, having people help navigate these changes and help give information and share information is really, really important. And I really talk to people a lot about giving, if you plan ahead, you give that family member who is having these changes happen to them a little bit of control about their changes. You know, if I have a new diagnosis of Parkinson's, for instance, you know, I want to start talking now, even if I'm only just newly diagnosed and don't have very many impairments. I want to start talking now. How does my medication affect me? How is this going to change in the next few years? What are some things going to do that I need to think about now? Well, we can make some plans before I start to have more significant problems and can't really have a say in what happens to my care. And it's kind of hard to think about this as a, you know, a plan ahead type of event, but it is really important to talk to the kids, talk to the support group. If you have a church group that you help work with and people that help with family care, it's important to kind of look to them as a resource and know that all of these things happen to all families. And so it's really important to kind of reach out to people, share information, and get help when you need it, and know what things to look for, what things to talk about. That's one thing that, you know, the Age of Central Texas is really good about, is kind of sharing that information for families. So as we look at aging, again, I've kind of said this over and over again, but really we want to talk a lot about safety and how we come together to support our aging parents or our aging spouse, so that we know safety is number one. Just the same as we talk about working with children, safety is number one. So we don't let the children play outside in the yard by themselves until we know that kid is safe and isn't going to run out into the street. Same thing when we talk about that teenager who's learning how to drive. We are not going to let that new teenager drive across the country because they don't have the experience, they don't have the judgment to do those things yet. As people get older and those physical, visual, and cognitive skills change, we go back to looking at safety as that number one priority. After we talk about safety, then we can talk about independence, because if you are safe, then you can maintain that independence. And as people start to need more help with their safety, then they start to need more help with being independent as well. And sometimes caregivers have to jump in and assist with those things. If we have caregivers helping with managing medications and helping manage financial skills and making sure that the bills are getting paid, those are kind of the times where we start to talk about, are they safe enough to do driving as well? Because those medication management issues and taking care of bills and checking accounts, those are very highly challenging activities of daily living. And if we need a caregiver to help with those things, we might need a caregiver to talk about those safety roles when it comes to driving. A lot of times I like to tell people that the family is the first person who knows about a safety concern. You know, as healthcare providers, we see people 2 hours for an assessment. We do not know that person. We are trained to look at certain things for their driving, and trained to look at their cognitive skills, their visual skills, and their physical abilities. but the family is the one who notices that decline first. And when the family is noticing these declines in abilities, they need to seek help by talking to the physician. Again, the physician has maybe a 15-minute visit. They might not know if from year to year these things have changed. If you are riding with your loved one and you're the passenger and you feel like they aren't noticing the traffic light turn red quickly enough, and you're having to say, hey, the light just turned red, or hey, notice that there's a bicycle over there. If they're not noticing those kind of changes in the road, that's a sign that we need to start talking to the kids and start talking to the doctor. Hey, I'm worried about your dad. Some difficulties with these things, and then the doctor needs to know. Another thing that we talk about a lot is confidence while driving. Again, when we talk about if driving is very anxiety provoking for you because of the increased traffic and the increased demand with aggressive drivers and things like that, sometimes that affects your ability to be safe. I know when there's someone who's driving very aggressive around me, it makes me feel a little bit more vigilant and a little bit more concerned about my safety. And now if I'm also concerned about my reaction time and my ability to pay attention, and my peripheral vision's not so great, now you can see that that makes that an even more unsafe situation. And so those are things that we need to talk to our loved ones about for driving. At St. David's, we do the adaptive driving program. This is medically based, and we call that medically based because we are all occupational therapists. So technically, this evaluation is an occupational therapy evaluation looking at someone's safety with the task of driving, considering that driving is one of those highest level activities of daily living that we talk about. We work with a wide variety of clients. We work with teenagers who have different medical diagnoses, teenagers who have learning impairments. We work with adults who maybe have had spinal cord injuries or strokes or brain injuries, all different kinds of things. And then we work with a lot of senior citizens who may have had a medical event like a stroke or a fall affecting their safety with their reaction time or something like that. And then sometimes, you know, that senior citizen is perfectly healthy physically, but they're having some cognitive changes or some changes to short-term memory, and the doctor's worried about their safety. So we work a lot with families trying to help them understand if it's safe to continue driving or what those next steps should be. So when we talk about a medically based driving evaluation, because we are occupational therapists, we are really looking at having a doctor's order, which is like the same as if a doctor writes a prescription for other therapies, or if a doctor writes a prescription for a medication. The doctor will write a prescription that says the person's name, their medical diagnosis, and it says that that person needs to be assessed for driver safety. Always we need somebody to have a driver's license or a learner's permit. Sometimes we'll get an older person who may have moved to Texas from another state, and then maybe their license was revoked in that other state, so they no longer have a driver's license, but they want to see if they can drive here in Texas. And usually that's not the case. They have to go and get a driver's license because we can't legally drive with that individual unless they are legal to drive. Because it is a medical evaluation, insurance often does pay for this driving assessment. And when we get that doctor's order, St. David's can check and see what the insurance benefits are for that. Medicare is one of those ones that most of our older people are using. And nowadays we have a lot of different Medicare replacement plans. And so they still go through that process to check and see, do you have insurance benefits and does it cover this assessment? So when we talk about our specific driving evaluation, that's a 2-hour evaluation. The first part is in the office. So we're not driving for 2 hours, thank goodness. But the first part's in the office and we do a lot of tests. There's nothing really that's written down. People always ask me if there's a written test and if they need to study for the written test. And there's no real writing. We do have a couple of pen and paper tests, and there's no need to study or prepare. We are looking for the most basic information. So really, in the office, we're looking for medical history. What's going on with this person? Why is there a safety concern? Are they strong enough and coordinated enough to drive? Do they have a good reaction time? What's the vision? What's the visual scanning abilities? And then we look at their cognitive abilities. Can they, answer some basic common sense questions about driving? Most of the time, these are pretty easy questions for people to answer, about situations that may occur while driving. If you have any experience with driving at all, these questions should be fairly easy. And then sometimes we have to look at adaptive equipment. Does the person have a wheelchair? Do they need to, have a way to load their wheelchair into the car? Or do they have a situation where they have diabetes and peripheral neuropathy in their legs? And so now, as they've gotten older, their legs don't have the same motor control and reaction time. And so maybe that person needs to learn how to use hand controls now. We have a lot of older folks learning to drive with their hand instead of using their feet because their proprioception in their feet is not as good anymore for controlling the brake and the gas. And then we're looking at insight. Did the person understand how they did in the office? Do they understand what their safety concerns are for driving when they got lost and drove for 3 hours and had a silver alert? Do they now understand that that's why we're checking to see if they are safe or not? A lot of times it's really hard for people to understand their safety concerns until we actually go driving. So the second part of that driving assessment is the behind the wheel assessment. And that's where we go to a parking lot. Everyone always wants to know if we can drive their personal vehicle, and we can't. We use our St. David's cars. Our St. David's cars are modified so that the therapist will have a brake so we can control the car if we need to. And we all like our brake a lot. So it's very important to be able to have that safety control if there is some sort of incident where the person has made an unsafe decision. So while we are looking at their driving abilities, we start in a parking lot. And then we just drive around in that parking lot for a minute and then go to a neighborhood, drive around in the neighborhood. Does the person stop at stop signs? Look appropriately at the intersection to make sure it's safe to go? Can the person go through some light city traffic streets? Can they go through some bigger streets? A lot of our folks that we see will say that they drive on the highways all the time and they do, cross country trips for vacation. So we definitely want to see, are they safe enough to do that higher level of driving? And so we can do that in our vehicles. We look at decision making. Did they make a safe decision at the intersection? Did they scan and notice the road signs? Did they check their mirrors and notice the cars around them? Were they aware of any changes in the road? Could they follow those basic rules of the road? And then did they make any adjustments? Sometimes it's trash day and the trash can is in the middle of the street. Did they make an adjustment to that? Or did the therapist have to say, hey, watch out for that cart. Let's move over a little bit. And after we get back, the therapist usually just takes a mental note of any kind of errors, or if the person is doing very good in their driving abilities, we take all of those mental notes. We try very hard not to distract the client and just let them drive, giving them those good instructions. And then we come back and talk about it. Did the person notice that the therapist had to stop the car in the middle of the road? A lot of times when I do use my brake because we're about to wreck, my client didn't even realize that I used my brake. And so that's a big safety concern. So we talk again about that insight. Are they aware that there's a safety consideration that happened and that the therapist had to take control of the car? Okay, so when we talk about aging, we always have to talk about mild cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's and dementia, and how that can impact safety. With that, we always talk a lot about the patient's history and then the family's report of safety problems. Because as you know, we can see people who have good days and bad days. And maybe when they come to St. David's, they're having a great day, but last week they crashed in the parking lot, or they have dings on their car that no one knows how they got there, or the person always has a flat tire on that right side because they hit the curb on those specific turns in their neighborhood. Those are things that we need to know from the family, because sometimes we don't see those safety problems. We strongly encourage, when someone's having some cognitive difficulties, that the family come to that evaluation and provide some information to the therapist. A lot of times it's challenging because we don't want the patient to feel like they are being kind of tattled on, and we don't want them to feel like they're being attacked by their family. We want them to know that they do have an unbiased assessment. However, it's really important for the therapist to know that there's been some decline in that person's safety, because if we see them on a good day and they pass, they may not come back for another year. And we certainly don't want that to be a safety problem, 6 months down the line, because actually there are history of a collision that we didn't know about and history of navigation errors. So when we also talk about cognitive deficits and memory impairments and how that affects people's safety, sometimes people can still drive with their cognitive deficits. And so we like to keep tabs on that. We like to educate the family and the caregivers on things to watch out for, a lot of those warning signs that I just mentioned, so that we know what to be aware of and how to keep our loved ones safe. The good thing with technology now is there's so many ways to know where your family member is. I use tracking apps to check on my teenagers, for instance. So I always know where they are, and they always know where I am. So if something were to happen to anyone in our family, knocking on wood, we could find that person pretty quickly and easily using our smartphones. And that's a great way to have our loved ones be safe and still be independent. Oh, Joe's at the senior center. He's doing his exercise group. I expect him home in an hour. Now, if Joe doesn't come back for 4 more hours, I'm going to send out someone to go look for Joe, because I'm worried about his safety. Where did he go? What happened? And maybe Joe just went walking to the mall or got distracted and had a long card game. We don't know, but we want to be able to make sure that's safe. And so using technology is a really good way to make sure that our loved ones are safe. The other thing we talk about with safety for driving, especially as people age, is maybe that person is safe today. And we say, drive your familiar routes, come back in a year, and we're going to keep checking on you every year until it's time to stop driving. And as we do those evaluations over and over again, we get to know the person, and we really get to see, you know, how driving has helped them stay independent and keep, you know, their cognitive abilities, because we know that once people have a more of a stay-at-home situation where they don't have as much stimulus from the outside world, sometimes that decline happens more rapidly. So we do want people out there if they are safe, so that they stay cognitively intact and able-bodied. All right, so I've kind of gone over this a little bit, but we talk about our driving evaluation. And when we look at the outcomes, basically there's three main outcomes that can happen. The person could be perfectly safe. We might tell that person to keep driving, but not to drive on the highway anymore. They're not fast enough. Their reaction time's not good enough. So maybe they just need to take those side roads to get to church and those side roads to get to their kid's house, but they can keep driving. We'll see you in a year. We might talk about having you come back for additional training. And this is especially true if you need adaptive equipment, because we need to train you how to use it. Or if you've had some kind of medical disability, like a stroke, for instance, where maybe now that stroke has caused you to be a little slower with your processing. And so we need some additional therapies to help you process things faster and know what to look for and how to react in a safe manner again. So we might do some training with that person. And then that last one, the one that nobody likes, is it might be time to stop driving. And so it's really important that we have that conversation at that time. And these are for those folks that, you know, had a very unsafe behind the wheel experience. They needed the therapist to take control of the car. They made multiple errors, and they did not have good awareness of their safety abilities. And so that's when we have to talk about time to turn in the keys and use those community resources. These are some of the basic things that we might say would be a restriction if you needed that to keep you safe. Don't drive on the highway. Stay in your familiar areas. That's my favorite one. We all kind of stay in our familiar areas anyway. And then if we have to go to an unfamiliar place, like a new doctor's office, for instance, maybe we need a family member to drive us to that place because it's too far from our home and we don't want to get lost. We don't know the roads out there. It's just not as easy. And then, of course, talking about adverse weather. We don't have much ice except for this year, but rain, sometimes the roads are very unsafe in the rain here, especially because it's so dry. And then we have a torrent of rain. It creates a hazard for our roadways. And then sometimes construction is a hazard for us. And then we also talk about, again, maybe it's time to stop driving and use those community resources. When it is time to transition out of driving, the OT who does that driving evaluation spends some time educating the family on different resources that may be appropriate. We have a lot of different volunteer networks. Austin's a great place for that. There's a very active volunteer network that helps people stay in their home for longer and stay independent by providing these services. So Drive a Senior is a great resource. And then there's a couple of ride sharing options that cater only to seniors. So that's also another option. Sometimes public transportation is an option, or metro access, or special transit programs that are available in different rural areas around our Austin area. And then sometimes it's good to hire a caregiving service or a transportation service. Like the visiting angels, for instance, or some other caregiving services that can just provide transportation. And then we talk about using a carpooling network for family and friends. You know, call mom and say, hey mom, I'm going to the grocery store. What do you need? What can I pick up for you? Rather than expecting mom to go out and get all those groceries nowadays. Or we go to church every Sunday at this time. Can we pick you up and take you? You know, using family and friends as a resource for keeping you safe helps keep everyone safe. And a lot of people tell me they don't want to be a burden on their family or friends, but really, I really strongly encourage people to use that network because it keeps everyone safe. I know for myself, I would prefer that if someone needed me, if my parents needed me to go and take them somewhere, I would prefer to do that rather than have them be a hazard to themselves or to other people out there on the road. And so it's not really burdensome. It is more burdensome if they've had a collision or if I have to go search for them and put out a silver alert, you know, to keep that person safe. And then the other thing we like to explain is that owning a car and driving and maintaining the car and maintaining car insurance and registration and all of those fees, a lot of times cost more in a year than if you have to pay that ride share twice a week to get to the doctor's appointments and the senior center, because that ride share doesn't really cost that much. It might be $10 or $15 a trip, whereas gas is maybe $30 or $40 for a tank of gas in that 1 week. So those are things to consider that we oftentimes don't look at, how that impacts us economically. And then I always like to finish with driving is our privilege in the state of Texas. So it's really basically really thinking about your own safety for yourself and being independent, but also being responsible and taking some responsibility. Our seniors are those folks that we really hold dear in our society for kind of helping establish so many things and helping with basically creating what we have today in our communities. And so it's really important to think about keeping that safe and being responsible for your part in making that safe. We are good citizens. We like to vote. We like to volunteer. We like to participate and help people. But if we're out there driving recklessly and causing a hazard, that's not being a good citizen. That's not being helpful, and that's hurting your community. So it's really important to take that personal responsibility because it is that privilege that we have. So really, that's pretty much it as far as my presentation about our driving evaluation process. And I'm sure there are lots and lots of questions. So.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We so appreciate you sharing all of this great information. And just want to remind everybody, if you have a question, please type that into the chat box. And we have about 20 minutes here left in our time together. So let's answer some of those questions. Wanted to circle back to one of the earlier slides that you presented when you were talking about the diagnosis that can affect driving, and you talked about polypharmacy. And it kind of dawned on me, for folks that don't know what that means, it means multiple medications. So we know that as we are getting older, we have more than one doctor often, and we get a lot of prescriptions from those doctors. So as caregivers, we need to be alert when our loved one gets a new prescription, because the side effects to that might be something that could affect their driving.
Yes, and it also may interact with another medication. So all the doctors need that medication list. And when we add a new one, they need to know what was on there before, because one medication may have an effect And then if you also have this other pain medication, now you're extra tired. And most of the time when we see those medications, even when I get something just for an antibiotic, it says right there on the medication information that the pharmacist gives me, see how you feel before operating heavy machinery or driving. So they don't want me using power equipment or driving my car until I make sure it's safe. If I feel woozy, probably shouldn't drive to work in rush hour. So.
Right. Got a question specifically about your services. Want to know if a lot of older adults self-request the services.
Yes, a lot of times we have people call and just say, you know, I want to make sure I'm safe. Or my doctor just diagnosed me with some cardiac issues and I haven't driven in a month because I've been dealing with these things and in and out of the hospital. Now I want to make sure I'm safe. Or we have sometimes people who will, maybe they haven't driven for a long time because their husband drove most of the time and now they're newly widowed and they're not really maybe confident in their skills and they're wanting to make sure that they're safe before they get back to driving. So we do have a lot of folks who self-refer. We still need the doctor to write the prescription, and there is still some sort of reason why they would need an assessment because, you know, we are medically based program, but we have a lot of folks who come in and that's the diagnosis, age-related complications or something like that. And they come in and we help them, you know, sometimes those little ladies who haven't driven for 2-3 years because they just didn't feel comfortable and now they have to because they're living on their own and they want to get back to it. They want to be independent for a few things. So we definitely work with those folks.
Great. So the process is ask the doctor to make the referral.
Exactly.
Terrific. Considering that, you know, COVID has made all of our worlds very interesting and trying to accomplish things, how difficult is it right now to get an appointment?
It's not difficult. We have 3 therapists on staff who do driving evaluations, and we have 2 vehicles. Most of our older folks who don't have any disabilities are using our kind of smaller SUV, which is kind of like I guess like a crossover vehicle. So it's not very big. And then we also have a minivan for different modifications, or if someone's a wheelchair user, we would use the minivan. And people get in, if we have a doctor's order, they might get in 2 or 3 weeks. When I first started, we were very, very busy and we may have had a 2-month or 3 months, sometimes waiting time. But we have more staff. I've been training people. We stay busy all the time, but you can get in. So it's not too long.
Terrific. And then the big question, is there a cost involved in the evaluation?
Well, it's all based on what your insurance covers. So the general information, I try to stay away from billing because as a therapist, I would give everything away for free and probably not have a home. But I have to live. And it goes through the hospital. So the hospital takes care of managing the billing and it goes through that medical insurance. So if someone has Medicare, for instance, as most of our seniors do, that is generally covered at 80%. With some of the new Medicare replacement plans, sometimes we have to get an authorization before we do that, but all of that's checked out beforehand. And our insurance people do a really good job of checking. One thing I will say is that if the person is doing a home health therapy, they need to be discharged from that home health therapy before coming to do outpatient therapy because we're an outpatient service and you can't kind of double dip with insurance. And then the other thing with that insurance charge is that if the person, let's say they've had a stroke and they've been in therapy for 5 months working on the stroke, and now they're coming to do this outpatient therapy, when they do the verification of benefits, we'll be able to know, do they have 5 visits left or not? And can that be covered by their insurance, or should they wait until their insurance resets in the new year?
Gotcha. I know that we talked about this earlier in the presentation, but I think it bears circling back around to. Had a question of, does a dementia diagnosis automatically disqualify you from driving?
No. Now, and I've been working with most of the doctors here in town, again, for more than 20 years, who treat dementia and cognitive impairment. And if you're just getting that memory deficit diagnosis before it goes into something else, all the doctors, if you're going in with a memory problem, they will send you to a driving evaluation for a baseline. So sometimes your deficits are pretty minor, and we will see you. If you are safe, we will help you document and show that you are safe. And then you come back in a year and we keep seeing you until it's time to stop driving. And so really, again, we're looking at that individual. So we can't just take an umbrella and say, okay, you have dementia, you're done, or okay, you're 70 and you're done. You have to look at the individual's ability and their safety. Now, if you have advanced dementia and you're very unsafe, it's time to stop. But we want to do the process and make sure.
Right. We mentioned that the program's based here in the Austin area. What are the areas that this driver evaluation is available?
We are at St. David's, Maine, which is on 32nd Street. We're working on trying to, because St. David's has several locations, but we haven't gotten it approved yet. And it's kind of a long process to do that through the hospital. We have a lot of rules and stuff, but we're working on trying to hopefully someday maybe do like a day clinic once a month or something in Georgetown, because we know a lot of our seniors live out there. And it's easier for them to just travel down the road instead of all the way into Austin. But currently, people travel to us and we do our assessment. Really, we see people from all of Central Texas. I have people from San Antonio, Waco, all those little small towns in between.
So you don't have a restriction of just the Austin area that can be served. The person would
right. They just have to come see us. Sure. We can't go to them yet.
Okay.
At least
all right. That's great to know. You mentioned that when a person reaches a certain age and they have to do their license renewal in person, that there is the possibility that the DPS employee might flag their license. Is there any recourse that a person has if that happens?
Yes. Well, if anyone flags your license, if I flag your license, or the doctor or your neighbor because you mowed down his, favorite begonias, anyone can report you to the state. If the DPS puts a flag, it's the same. It's a report to the state, what's called the Medical Advisory Board. And so that triggers an investigation, and they will send you a whole packet of information, and you have to get the doctor to certify and fill out, it's like 10 pages, fill out it goes through all your systems, your vision, your cardiovascular system, your physical abilities, everything. And the doctor has to say, yes, he's safe. And then it goes back to the Medical Advisory Board, and they can ask you to take a written test, they can ask you to take a driving test, and they can revoke your license. We try not to make that report ourselves, but sometimes we do have to do that. If someone is telling us that they are going to continue driving and we feel very, very concerned about their safety, and maybe they don't have that family support, their kids can't stop them from driving, they can't take the car away or remove the keys. Sometimes we have to make that report, and it's a lengthy process, and there's a court hearing, and it's not the ideal, but there is a recourse for that. So if you go through all of their steps and then satisfy that board's ability to review, they can either reinstate your license or take it away.
Okay. All right. In the few minutes that we've got left, let's talk about how we as caregivers can have this conversation with our loved one, because we know that it's probably one of the hardest things that we would ever have to talk about with our loved ones.
Yes.
Because it's rational for us as caregivers to be concerned about the safety, and we can say, you have to understand that driving is a privilege, it's not a right. But what it all boils down to for mom and dad is that we're talking about taking away their independence.
Yep.
And so as the expert in this, who deals with this every day and has to have this hard conversation with a lot of people, give us some advice here. How can we start having this conversation with our loved one? We've noticed that their reaction time is not great. We're starting to worry about them. How can we start having this conversation without all the walls going up and mom, dad getting very upset, not talking to us anymore?
Open and honest, and talking about it before there's a problem is the best. I've already talked to my parents about it, and said, look, at some point, it's going to be time for you guys to stop driving. I don't live in the same city as they do. My brother lives close by, but not as close as he would like. So we all are going to have to talk about these changes as they happen and before they happen. So it's really important, much like we prepare our will, we make sure we have enough medical insurance, we make sure we have enough life insurance. Once we start talking about, hey, I'm starting to, take all of these meds for blood pressure and the doctor's worried about a heart attack, we need to start talking about other things too. How are you going to stay safe in your home? What happens if you're not safe in your home? What do you want me to do? What happens if, and I have a lot of people call me who live out of state and they're managing their family who live here in Austin. And it's a very challenging thing, but getting people involved, talking about it early. There are also a lot of nowadays kind of care management groups. I'm sure you guys know about some of them. You pay them to help manage the care of your loved one. They can go to doctor's appointments and then give you a report. They can help with medication. They keep track of a lot of things. Again, it's a paid service. Not everybody has the access to that. But talking about it early, talking about it a lot, and letting those loved ones know that it's not about independence, it's about safety. Because again, you have to go back to that safety rule as the first goal. If you are going to fall down every time you walk around, you're not safe. You need a mobility aid. If you are going to crash your car, you're not safe. That's the bottom line.
Right. And I think if you keep bringing it back around to, this is an issue of safety. It's not about you personally. It's not about, taking away your independence. It's about keeping you safe and keeping other people safe. And I liked what you said about bringing it back around to what do you want me to do?
Right.
So that it's not about me telling you, it's me asking you, I want you to tell me how you want me to help you with this.
Exactly. Having a sense of control is the main thing. Having a sense of control, and when you have a medical event, you've lost control of your abilities. When you have a cognitive challenge, you've lost control. So before that control goes away, you want to start talking about it. My parents are in their early 70s. We've started talking about it. They don't have cognitive problems, but we talk about it now. when you have problems and need more help, will you move to Austin so I can help you? And they've said yes. So, you know, those are things that we've talked about. And now we know that if they do need that extra level of care, they can come here where they have more resources. And that's the thing. Planning ahead is going to help everyone. Talking about it early, roping the doctor in if there's a concern, because the doctor is an authority. The daughter is not an authority. The wife or the husband is not an authority. And that's emotionally tied up as well. And so you need to take emotion out and talk about reality and talk about safety and getting an authority involved, which is another reason why we have such a very successful program, is that we do this. We're not biased. You know, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just looking at those safety things. It's very concrete. You didn't stop at the stop sign. You know, that's concrete.
Right. And we've talked several times this week in sessions about when we have to have very hard conversations, sometimes it does help to have that third party be the one who instigates the conversation. The doctor, their financial advisor, the minister, if they're someone who is of a faith community, someone other than the child, because a lot of times as parents, we don't listen to what the kids say, you know. And so sometimes it's easier to have someone else be the bad guy for you to bring up that conversation. But also, I think you pointed out, this is not a one and done conversation, you know, talking about it more than once. We might introduce the idea of, I want to talk to you about, you know, what do you want if this happened? You know, what happens if, God forbid, you have a stroke and you have a cognitive issue and you're not going to be safe to live here at home anymore? What kind of place where would you prefer to live? Would you want to move in with me? Would you want to move to assisted living? You know, I just want to know well in advance of any of this so that I'll know exactly what you want. Okay, then I come back the next day. What if something happened, how would you want me to talk to you about your driving? If it was obvious that you were not safe to drive, how do you want me to address that to you? So at least we're opening the doors, and then, you know, we come back to it. And, you know, we're running out of our time here, but, you know, the holidays are coming, and it's a perfect time for us as families to be together to, you know, start introducing these conversations. You know,
family meetings are very important.
Yeah. And that way everybody's on the same page. And again, I love this idea of, you tell me what you want so that I can honor your wishes.
Exactly.
And that way we're introducing this as, it's not me telling you what to do, it's you telling me how you want this to be handled if and when this comes up.
Exactly. A family plan, just like you have a family plan for emergencies and other things that come up. A family plan is important.
Jennifer, I want to thank you so very much for spending your morning with us. I know that you're very busy, and we appreciate all of this information. It's a lot of fantastic information that we can take with us, and we can have these conversations with our families and with our loved ones. So I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. And we appreciate you for joining us today. We know that we brought a lot of great information to you this week. Reminder that we're going to be sending you links to not only all of these recordings, but also we're going to provide you with the PowerPoints for all of our presentations and some great handouts that our speakers have provided for us as well. Also want to remind you, keep an eye out for that survey, because that'll help us to plan for next year. Jennifer, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for being a part of this year's 8th annual Williamson County Caregiver Conference. I'll always end by reminding everyone that there is no shame in asking for help as a caregiver, because all of us need assistance at some point in our journey. So reach out to us here at Age of Central Texas, at AARP, any of our great sponsors and organizations that have been a part of this year's conference, if we can be of assistance to you in any way in your journey. We hope you have an amazing weekend and a very early wish of happy holidays to you. Take care and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.